Spring is a little late this year here on Garrick Drive in Churchillboro. The flowers that last May were making their way toward the hearts of suburban residents are finding it somewhat difficult to live through the frost that has struck this tiny, well-to-do borough nestled in the foothills of the Alleghenies in western Pennsylvania. 1 year ago at this time, it was warmer, and the sun was shining that day here on Garrick Drive. Arthur Krause had gone to work, like any other day. Laurie Krause was in school, and Doris was going about her usual work. And Allison Krause was about 135 miles away, in a school at Kent State in Ohio, where years before she had set her mind to go when her family lived in Ohio. 1 year ago at this time, this street was pretty much the same as it is today. The United States of America, her bedroom communities, where people raised their children, most of them unaware that America was sending her young men into another faraway place, Cambodia. But 135 miles away, the young people at Kent State were not unaware. They had planned a demonstration, youth's answer to the futility and frustration hurled at them by a generation of people too complacent and perhaps too insensitive to hear them. And so this was Garrick Drive a year ago. It's pretty much the same today. Pretty much the same. The children are going to school. Arthur Krause will go to work. But at 135 miles away, Allison Krause will not be. She, too, is home. In a little cemetery down the street and around the corner she's buried, her body perhaps now just dust, but to every American who cares where we go and how we get there, her memory one of a child who cared more about butter than guns, more about people than parasites. Spring was a little late this year on Garrick Drive. Since the last spring, people have read about a place called My Lai 4 and heard about a man named Kelly. They have watched as 300,000 people marched on Washington and said, "Get out now." They have heard a president of the United States say he will not be intimidated by protesters, and they've watched the world head down the road toward Rome, another society that paid no attention to its young people. Allison Krause is dead. So what? So what to these people here on Garrick Drive this day? To Doris and to Arthur Krause, there's only memories, and some things in the young lady's bedroom they cherish as all that is physically around to remind them. So what, you say? The Federal Bureau of Investigation says the guard was at fault. But those who choose to idealize the FBI on every other issue, damn them on this one. In Kent, Ohio, a grand jury of local people, many of whom never traveled more than 50 miles from their own home, say the kids were at fault. And the Krauses want one thing, a very simple thing, a federal grand jury investigation. They want a thorough, complete investigation of why, on that day, just a year ago, kids, many of them no older than their Allison, fired shots indiscriminately at people who had so much in common with them. If only they had a chance to meet with them and talk with them, the guard would have discovered that the kids at Kent State that day and themselves were both victims of an older society. There are things no reporter can talk about in the case of a daughter dead so young. The diapers they changed when she was wet, the first time they held her in her room at the hospital, her first trip to the hospital emergency room when she had an accident, that report card at school of which she was so proud, the first boy who ever held her hand, and the first time she said "Daddy," it almost broke a man's heart. There are memories of the first snow and the sleds and the time they told her she was going to have a sister or brother, and her little face filled with both excitement and a little terror at the same time because she didn't understand. It's all right here, right in there, in that comfortable house on Garrick Drive here in Churchillboro. There are other things in there, too. There are frustrations, there's some bitterness, and there's another little girl named Laurie who will live for the rest of her life with the knowledge that the country to which she will always have to salute a flag and stand for its anthem will not investigate the untimely death of her big sister. If you are near tears, and if I've done this to you, I am not sorry. We must all cry this day, not just for Allison Krause, but for the guardsmen who killed her, and the society that created the conditions that made both of them, Miss Krause and the guardsmen, victims of a society perhaps that is much too sophisticated and not nearly enough civilized. I just want to know what you would like the people to do 1 year later. What would you want?
Well, the number one thing I want is a federal grand jury called by the Department of Justice because of the fact that we do have a system here which has not been completed yet. There's a lot of things which have not been clarified. For example, 6 National Guardsmen stated that they aimed at the kids at Kent State, which were some 250 feet to 300 feet away. They said they only aimed at their knees. Now, you go around aiming at people that far away, there's something wrong when a further investigation doesn't find out just what the National Guard was thinking. Did the National Guard get orders to shoot? That's a question which hasn't been clarified yet. The Scranton Commission pointed out that there were many people at fault. The Department of Justice summary of the FBI report said that these 6 men, and I think these are the 6, but we're not sure of that, could be brought up for criminal charges. Even Vice President Agnew made a statement if there were no snipers involved at Kent State, that it would be considered second-degree murder. Questions like these, standing at this late date 1 year later and not being answered, shows that our system of justice has not been used to its fullest avail. I plead for a federal grand jury.
There wasn't any sniper in the crowd then, so why did they shoot into the crowd? They shot into the crowd. They didn't shoot over heads. Maybe some of the guardsmen were shooting over heads. Who knows? But they were coming at me, and the ground around me was being thrown up by bullets.
The National Guard wanted weapons fired because they were being threatened with rocks. We consider rocks a lethal weapon, said one commander. Robert Shackney asked Guard General Robert Canterbury if he had a sniper report.
I do not know.
General, I don't want to press the point too hard. These are difficult circumstances, but I'm sure many people will be asking what possible justification there can be for firing bullets into a crowd of people, many of whom may be innocent bystanders, if in fact they have not necessarily fired on your troops.
I think the only justification is for your own life that's in danger.
What the investigators have to determine then is whether indeed there was a sniper and whether the Guard was justified in firing its weapons, or whether, as some people here believe, the Guard panicked under the pressure of a rock-throwing attack and fired its weapons indiscriminately into the crowd, killing 4 students. Ike Pappas, CBS News at Kent, Ohio.
The dead students, William Schrader, 19, of Lorain, Ohio, a high school honor student, basketball star, and trumpet player. Sandra Lee Scheuer, 20, of Youngstown, Ohio, a junior majoring in speech therapy. She has graduated from high school with honors and maintained a 3.6 average on a 4-point system. Jeffrey Miller, 20, of Plainview, New York, a high school honor graduate and a gifted mathematician majoring in drama. Allison Krause, 19, of Pittsburgh, a freshman who wanted to be a teacher.
There are things no reporter can talk about in the case of a daughter dead so young. The diapers they changed when she was wet, the first time they held her in her room at the hospital, her first trip to the hospital emergency room when she had an accident, that report card at school of which she was so proud, the first boy who ever held her hand, and the first time she said Daddy had almost broke a man's heart. There are memories of the first snow and the sleds and the time they told her she was going to have a sister or brother, and her little face filled with both excitement and a little terror at the same time because she didn't understand.
Her father, Arthur Krause, was interviewed in Pittsburgh by Paul Moyer of KDKA-TV.
She resented being called a bum because she disagreed with someone else's opinion. She felt that war in Cambodia was wrong. Is this dissent a crime? Is this a reason for killing her? Have we come to such a state in this country that a young girl has to be shot because she disagrees deeply with the actions of her government? I want something to be done. What I would like to see happen is that my daughter's death and those of the other 3 children, as well as the wounded, not be in vain.
If you are near tears, and if I've done this to you, I am not sorry. We must all cry this day, not just for Allison Krause, but for the guardsman who killed her, and the society that created the conditions that made both of them, Miss Krause and the guardsman, victims of a society perhaps that is much too sophisticated and not nearly enough civilized.
Where were you on May the 4th, 1970? If your name were Milton Shep, you were well on your road to becoming governor of Pennsylvania. If your name were Sarah Eisenson, you would not believe the telegram from the government that your husband had been killed in Vietnam. And if your name were Leo DeRocher, you laid it out good the night before to the Chicago Cubs. Shape up. If your name were Arthur Krause, you were at work when the phone rang, and never again would a phone ring that you wouldn't wonder about that phone call that day, May the 4th, 1970. The war in Vietnam was now in Cambodia. It's May 4th, 1970. In Washington, the United States Supreme Court will rule on this day that it is not unconstitutional to confess to a lesser crime to avoid being charged with a more serious one. In Cleveland, Ohio, the Plain Dealer, Ohio's largest daily newspaper, suggests this day that Howard Metzenbaum, running for the Senate, is buying his votes. And not far down the road in Kent, Ohio, Allison Krause and 3 of her buddies will be dead when the day is done. Now you are in Kent, Ohio, peaceful, this college town where Kent State turns out people with degrees much as J&L does steel. This is a peaceful college town. But look down the road. Isn't that the National Guard down there? What are they doing here in Kent? Isn't this a college campus? What's the guard doing there? And that girl, what's she doing? Placing a flower in the barrel of a guardsman's gun. Isn't that the Krause girl? Isn't she the one who said flowers are nicer than guns? And now you're in Churchill Borough, just down the parkway from Pittsburgh, and a family is in mourning. Cancer or an auto accident. Those are the things that snuff out life from the young, the ones with so much living left to do. But this wasn't any of these. This was a gun, and these were soldiers, and they killed this girl. Little Allison Krause wasn't so little. She was in college now. Wasn't it just yesterday when she trotted off to the first grade, her short dress, her hair neat, pretty, to learn about life? There were no soldiers in the first grade, just in college, and they killed her. The war was so very far away for all of us, so very far. But now, to Doris and Arthur Krause, it was just 120 miles down the turnpike in Kent, Ohio. And now it's 1972. And this morning, just as she does every morning, your own little girl comes down the steps as you start to leave for work. "Bye, Daddy," she says. "Love you." And this morning, those words had special meaning for me. My own little girl said, "Bye, Daddy, I love you," and I cried for my friend Arthur Krause, because his little girl loved him, and now she's dead, and it was so useless, like this war, like every war. Now it's 1972. And every waking minute of Arthur and Doris Krause's life is taken up with the compulsion for justice, the justice they have yet to see. Allison will not be back. But was it Lincoln who said, "These dead shall not have died in vain"? Where are you on May 4th, 1972? If your name is Arthur Krause, you're on the other end of the telephone talking to me. Good morning, Arthur.
Good morning, Merle.
Art, can you give me the events of May the 4th, 1970 to date? What has happened to you, and what you have done, and what has happened?
Well, you know, Merle, there's been so many things that have happened, and everything that seems to have happened has made our quest for justice very difficult. You know, you know these things, but I'll put them together for you. We have heard about the lie of the snipers, of the National Guard, saying that there were snipers there. The convening of the Scranton Commission, which gave us great heart when the President brought that together. But those findings were basically ignored by the President and by the Department of Justice. The FBI report stated what happened, but has been ignored by the Department of Justice under John Mitchell. Beyond this, we had the farce of the Ohio State Grand Jury, whose findings were so obnoxious that they were ordered destroyed because of its being illegal. In addition, the thing that struck us probably the hardest is that a group of Kent State students petitioned. The right of petition, was one of our factors in the Constitution, for a federal grand jury to be convened. This was ignored by the administration, and another 40,000 students around the country added their signatures to this, and that was also submitted down there. So basically 50,000 students tried to use the proper procedure to ask for a redress, but that was ignored. Merle, we've asked the question a zillion times, why is the government afraid of allowing the matter to go to court? We are and have been doing our best through the law in every case to receive a hearing through either the state of Ohio or the federal court. the courtroom, in my opinion, is a place to get the truth. That's where it should be, but for some unknown reason, we can't get it out into the courtroom.
Arthur, today, the funeral service at 11 a.m. will be carried here on WJAS for J. Edgar Hoover. And I know that you had tremendous respect for the Federal Bureau of Investigation and what they've done since May the 4th, 1970.
Yes, Merle, we sure do. And, we join in the nation's sorrow on the passing of Mr. Hoover, whose bureau was responsible, and I say this very emphatically, for reviving our faith in the impartiality of this branch of the federal government. This was best demonstrated by their most thorough examination of what happened on May 4th, 1970, when we lost our daughter Allison and the other parents lost their Bill, Sandy, and Jeff. And my goodness, the FBI has been the most impartial of our group, of all of our government bureaus, and yet the Department of Justice doesn't even pay attention to what the FBI found there. And we protest their refusal, and protest very strongly upon their refusal to act upon the FBI investigative findings. And we now look forward to President Nixon responding favorably to a letter which the other parents and myself wrote to President Nixon. And I again repeat, the appeal of the students, some 50,000, I hope that the President Nixon will look upon this with favor. Beyond this, we'd like an explanation of Mr. Mitchell's statement that although the deaths were unnecessary, unwarranted, and inexcusable, they were not illegal. Does that make sense to you, Merle?
It never has, and I wonder if the incoming Attorney General, Mr. Kleindienst, should he be confirmed, will have any more to add to this, or do they, as far as you know now, Arthur, do they consider this a closed case?
I've read some of the statements that were giving in the hearings that Mr. Kleindienst had with some of the committees in the Congress, and he basically said that as far as he was concerned, it was a closed case. Merle, you've heard of James Ahern, haven't you?
I sure have. Former chief of police.
Yeah, well, he was former chief of police at New Haven and a member of the Scranton Commission appointed by President Nixon. And a book came into my hands just recently that he just finished writing called Police in Trouble. There's some specific statements in this book which, coming from a professional policeman who had access to the many facets of the events of May 4th, are quite to the point, and I'd very much like to quote from this book, if I may, Merle.
Go right ahead, Arthur.
Let's see. A lot of people have called this tragedy, and here's what Mr. Ahern said about it. To playwrights and some politicians, the events at Kent State and Jackson State might have been tragedies. But if our society has a true commitment to the fair and equal enforcement of the law and to the concept of justice, they have to be called murder. He goes on. Although the Scranton Commission made no allocation as to guilt, and although it did not say that crimes as such had been committed, there should be little doubt in the public mind that those who fired the guns at Kent State and Jackson State were and are liable to criminal prosecution. When people are killed unnecessarily, inexcusably, unreasonably, and unjustifiably, only someone with a deep cynicism concerning our system of justice could assume they were not killed illegally. There is a wealth of evidence concerning the Kent and Jackson State killings that have not been released to the public. The FBI has 8,000 pages on Kent State alone. And a news leak in the Akron Beacon Journal indicated some time ago that certain members of the Bureau felt confident concerning the possibility of successful prosecution, at least in the Kent State case. Now, Merle, that's a man who has had access to everything about it. He's a member of the police department. He has been a member of the police department. Those aren't my words.
The words of a respected policeman.
How much longer can we continue this insanity which has torn our nation into all facets of unbelief? I don't know, Merle. It has to end. It's a cancer which is tearing us apart. It's creating bestiality in the American people, in my opinion.
Art, I join you, I think you know, in hoping and praying with you that justice can come, some justice, for what happened 2 years ago today on the campus of Kent State University. I don't have to tell you that I would do anything in my power to join you in bringing about that justice. It cannot bring Allison back, but for my children and your other daughter, Laurie, and all the children of the world, we've got to save it, don't we?
We sure do, Merle.
You have worked within the system for 2 long years to do that, and we commend you for that, and hope that in the future, despite the fact that Allison is dead, there will be brighter days when we can both look and say, justice has been done.
Thank you, and God bless you, Merle, for all you're trying to do.
Thank you, Art.
Okay, bye-bye.
Art Krause of Churchill Borough. Meantime, suits totaling more than $12 million have been filed against the state of Ohio today and the Ohio National Guard in connection with the disturbance at Kent State that left 4 students dead 2 years ago today. The suits were filed late yesterday by the American Civil Liberties Union in both Cuyahoga County Court, that's Cleveland, and federal court in Cleveland. One suit for nearly $7.5 million was filed on behalf of 6 students wounded in the confrontation and the parents of 2 of the slain students. Named as defendants were former Ohio Governor James Rhodes, 35 Ohio National Guardsmen, and 200 John Does, as the legal term goes. Another suit for more than $3.5 million was filed on behalf of the same 6 students and the Schroeder parents, naming only the state of Ohio as a defendant. A federal suit on behalf of Mrs. Martin Shower of Youngstown, the mother of 1 slain student, asks $1 million damages. A similar action asking $2 million in damages was filed in Cuyahoga County Court. It was 2 years ago today in Kent, Ohio, and the sun was shining. These National Guardsmen, many of them were youngsters themselves. Some of them had never had the opportunity themselves to go to college, but they were as young as the ones with whom they were having the confrontation. 2 long years ago today, and the sun was shining at Kent, Ohio. For the Krause family and the victims, the other victims' families, the sun will not shine again until there is justice. That justice can come in 2 packages. A recognition that murder was done at Kent State, and the end of the war in Vietnam.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening. This is the 37th time I have spoken to you from this office, where so many decisions have been made that shape the history of this nation. Each time I have done so to discuss with you some matter that I believe affected the national interest. In all the decisions I have made in my public life, I have always tried to do what was best for the nation. Throughout the long and difficult period of Watergate, I have felt it was my duty to persevere, to make every possible effort to complete the term of office to which you elected me. In the past few days, however, it has become evident to me that I no longer have a strong enough political base in the Congress to justify continuing that effort. As long as there was such a base, I felt strongly that it was necessary to see the constitutional process through to its conclusion, that to do otherwise would be unfaithful to the spirit of that deliberately difficult process and a dangerously destabilizing precedent for the future. But with the disappearance of that base, I now believe that the constitutional purpose has been served.
There was a special feature to this program arranged by the Arts for World Unity. We are presenting a new Bolivigal work titled Requiem for Allison. It's in memory of one of the 4 student victims who were killed at the Kent State University just 2 years ago, and is part of that university's memorial program this year on May the 4th. It is based on an impressive poem by Peter Davies, which Madame Weigel read over the TV within the last year's Kent State memorial program. She was so moved by it that she could not rest before having found out who the author was and secured a copy of the poem, and then set it to music for soprano and string quartet. And we're to hear it played and sung for us by Helen Phillips, with the assistance of a group of young students from Juilliard, coached by Earl Cowes. Miss Muriel Nervous, violinist. Miss Kikwe Ikeda, violinist. Sitako Nagata, violist. And Sacheya Isamura, violoncellist. And now the Requiem for Allison. The poem will now be read first by Miss Phillips, and then the song will be interpreted.
You out there, you patriots of silence, what do you know of me? I who lie in this lonely place beneath the soil, cold as the death I died, for no reason or cause except your hatred. If I could come to you whole and let you see me, touch me, know me, would you then weep for me, you silent patriots? Do you hear the mournful song of a distant bird, the soft and gentle flutter of her wounded wings? Or are you so made of stone and steel, no dart of love could pierce the armor of your frozen hearts? Then go, preach your hate, but mark me well, the day will surely come when I and others will arise and come to all of you. Love and peace.